Hello, and welcome to another episode of Creating Cultures that Outperform. I'm Frank Warner. I'm the founder of People Productive and a new website called Boardroom Edge. And with me today, I have Terry Mays, our certified culture engineer. I hope you're really enjoying all the topics we've been covering on human machine teaming with AI. Last week, we talked about the importance of questioning things. And this week, we're going to go add on to that and talk about how do you actually create a questioning culture. Questioning culture is super important. You don't want to trust everything you get from AI. You want people working together, teaming together, questioning the thing that comes up, the things that come up. You want that right dose of skepticism about the information you're receiving. And so that means you've got to build a culture where questioning is in the DNA of the culture. And so today we're going to cover a number of things that are negative indicators. What negative indicators could you find in your culture that are going to get in the way of you being successful with AI? So let's start here. Number one, top-down authority. Do what you're told. This is the worst environment you could possibly have to implement AI. People don't ask questions. You're going to get in trouble because they're not going to be judicious enough in terms of how they interrogate the information they get from AI or question what somebody else is doing with AI. And so I think this is one we've all seen. We've all been in this type of culture over time. So this you have to avoid.
Yeah, that's a full-on dictatorship. Do what I say do. That's the only thing. I'm in charge. I'm in control. I know everything. I'm better than everybody else. So listen to what I'm saying. You don't want people to feel like that because once they do, they'll start to disengage for sure. And then if you're trying to have people be in this mode of creativity, they'll shut down because you're telling them, no, I'm the one that's in charge. I'm the one that's in control, and you have to do what I say. That absolutely negates any kind of creativity or, any higher level thought that people would want to have.
Yeah. And then we get this one that is where the culture, the whole organization views questioning as threatening. It's not just a top-down thing, do what you're told. But instead of it being rewarded as valuable and thoughtful, people, just want to go along with the program. And, let's just get this done. No questioning. It's part of the culture. It's part of the fabric. And questioning is really something that's so valuable, being skeptical about the information you receive. This is a very, very important cultural trait that companies are going to have to nourish, nurture, and grow, without a doubt.
Yeah. This one I think is embedded in that philosophy that the manager has to know everything. The manager is the leader because they know everything. That is just false. It's not a true reflection of leadership. You don't have to know everything. You just have to know how to get everything done. And that there's a big difference between those two statements. You need to know how to leverage the resources that you have and to utilize all the tools that you have. So you have some gems of resources on your teams. Don't feel like you have to be the only person bringing ideas to the table. You don't have to be the only person making decisions. You can empower your people to do what they do best. And when they do, it just makes you shine as a leader. It just makes you stand out because you know how to help people thrive in the areas where their strengths are. And then you help prop up people where you need to sometimes when people are weak. And so you don't expect every person to be strong in everything. Everybody has weaknesses, but the good leader knows how to recognize those weaknesses and then pair them with someone that can help them grow in their weaknesses. Don't just talk about them or cast them off to the side and say they don't know. Don't underestimate people, but give them a chance to come up to the level that you want them to be at, and then reward the ones that are doing what they need to do.
Yeah, and I would go even further. Instead of telling people what to do and knowing everything, the great leaders are the ones who ask great questions.
Absolutely.
Great leaders ask great questions. And so questioning is an incredibly strong leadership trait. And it's also an incredibly strong cultural trait.
Yeah, it's because they already know they're not the smartest person in the room, right? So why would you come into this room full of very highly intelligent people that you're paying to be there, by the way, and then not listen to what they have to say? Like, that's just idiotic.
Or draw it out of them. And, when you do that, you create an apathetic culture, actually.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Nobody cares about what I have to say. So when you have this apathetic culture, you have people, they don't care, they're not really listening, and forget about them asking questions. That's not going to happen. And
That's
so
right. This
very bad.
person feels, they feel like nobody cares. So what's the point? So they'll just
Yeah.
kind of go into their little hole and do what they're told to do, and they'll never come out again and ask any questions. They're not, because they don't care. They don't want to give the time to it. They're just not even listening most of the time when those types of questions might come up where they might have an opportunity to think outside the box and be creative. They won't even hear it because they're not really listening.
Mhm. So true.
Yeah.
Um,
How many times have we been in the room with somebody and somebody asks a question and the person that they're talking to is not paying attention, and then they have to ask the question again, or somebody else in the room asks the
bad
question or answers
cultures
the question,
all the
you
time,
know,
always
that happens.
happening, right?
Yeah.
And so, if you want to have a great culture, management's got to lead by example. They've got to be publicly vulnerable, curious, ask those questions. Great leaders ask great questions. So that's the example. You must lead by example. And since people don't do what management says they do what they do, you will automatically start to cultivate a culture where people are more curious and ask more questions because you do. That means it's safe to ask questions. It's encouraged. You're modeling that behavior. And so if the leaders in the company aren't leading by example, you're not going to solve this problem. You're not going to be AI ready culture.
Yeah. Yeah. People will be afraid to show any sign of weakness. So people see vulnerability as weakness, but in actuality, it's strength. And
Yeah.
so when you can get people to see that difference, to see that being vulnerable with their coworkers is necessary in order to build trust. This is like the fast track to trust. If you're honest and open with people and vulnerable, trust comes after that, because now people see, oh, they're just like me. We're not that different. Everybody is going through something. Everybody is dealing with something. And so you want to show that human side of yourself, because there is a tendency to dehumanize leaders and
Yeah.
not see them as real people. And so when you show vulnerability, you humanize yourself in a way that helps people connect with you.
And of course, we get to this, which is a level 2 culture where it's not safe and uncollaborative. That's that lack of emotional, psychological safety. When people don't feel safe to speak up because they've been put down so many times, this is what characterizes it. And that can happen not because of leaders, because of coworkers. You need a place where people feel safe to be themselves, to speak up, be encouraged to speak up. If you have lack of emotional, psychological safety, you're not going to have a culture that's AI ready at all.
Not at all, because remember, psychological safety is about the individual. It's their perception. It's not necessarily what's true. So you really do have to make sure that that person is in a space, it's their feelings, it's how they have perceived things. Whether they're right or wrong is not relevant. The point is to validate those feelings and then find a way to show them that it's not what they think. Because usually a lot of times, people will feel a certain way about something. And when they get more information, they're like, oh, I didn't know that. That's usually the first thing that people say. Oh, if I had known that, then I wouldn't have been feeling like I was feeling. And so be vulnerable. Let people in on the information that you can share. And when you can't share it, say, I can't share it, but there is more to it, because we perceive things.
Yeah.
Humans have that ability to, most of the time, you can tell when somebody is leaving something out of the story. They
Well,
may never say it, and you'll kind of go, I don't know if I believe that, or I don't know if I trust that.
and look, if you're a good leader, you're perceptive enough to see that something is bothering them. And
Right.
you've got to go over and ask and say, hey, you look a little down. What's going on? Something happened in the meeting today. You look a little down, leaving the room. What happened?
Yeah.
And then they'll tell you, because the closer you could do it to the time it occurs, the more effective it's going to be in terms of dealing with it.
Right. And you're showing that you care, and that compassion that you show to the other person is just less like money in the bank. It
Oh,
is money in the bank because you're building up credits for the times when things are pretty crappy and you do have to ask people to work overtime or come in on the weekends or do something like that. You know, the times where I felt like leaders really cared about me as a person and they asked me to work overtime versus the ones that I didn't feel like cared about me at all.
yeah.
My
Karen's reciprocal.
desire,
Like to
my
help out.
desire to help was very
Yeah.
low. Of course I did because, I'm a professional. I get paid the job, paid to do the job. But man, my desire was low. I
Oh,
did
yeah.
not want to help. I'm like, no, figure it out yourself. And then the better part of me decided that I wouldn't be so mean.
Oops. I popped this one up a little early before we were finished with the last topic. But, if you don't have an environment where there's freedom to fail, people can take risks, they're encouraged, they're not going to experiment with all the prompts. They're going to be afraid to make a mistake. They're not going to use the new tools as well as they should. They're really not going to want to ask questions of other people when maybe they think they did something wrong, because it's not that type of culture. And so you must provide risk taking. This is an environment where there's a lot of change. Change management is going to be important. And having a culture that you have cultivated freedom to fail really matters.
Yeah. There's been a recurring theme here with fear. So if you allow your culture to be one where people are afraid, they're afraid to fail, they're afraid to raise their hand and ask questions, they're afraid to speak up, then you reap the harvest of that fear. And that fear is keeping you out of information that you need as a leader. If people don't feel like they can speak up without being retaliated upon or that they can't make a mistake, then they'll hide it when they do, because everybody makes mistakes. And so if you feel like, well, if they know I made a mistake, then, they're going to fire me or whatever the case might be, then people start hiding, covering things up. And you don't want that. You really don't want your culture to be where people feel like they have to hide mistakes and not say something when they know there's a problem.
Yeah. Well, another one, lack of safety. This is silos, where
Yeah,
people aren't necessarily open and receptive to what you have to say because you're not part of that team. This cross-functional teaming has always been weaker than it should be in corporations. There are a lot of walls and silos all over companies today. And when you limit openness and transparency between organizations, and people don't feel free to speak up and suggest what you should be doing on the other side of that wall.
yeah.
So
Well,
that's a
everybody has been just defending their turf, right? It's
Mhm.
it's always been a turf war, us versus them. It's never been we thinking across the board in companies. And I think what's happening now with agile teams and just with the rapid change, I mean, the pace that we are moving with change is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
And the way that technology is changing and increasing, it is demanding that the silos come down because you're limiting so much by keeping those silos up. You're not able to move as fast and make changes as quickly. And as a result, you're going to lag behind if you don't fix that part of your organization.
Well, if
Where
they don't
you
fix their
allow
culture
that cross-function.
completely,
Yeah, you got to have
they
that
got
cross-functional collaboration to
to
get,
address all this, right?
yeah, you got to get that knowledge into all
Yeah.
parts of the organization. So it used to be, I work in IT, so it used to be IT and the business. Well, IT is the business. And so if you're not infusing all of that business knowledge in your IT resources, you're making a huge mistake. You can't have these silos where, IT people are just focused on the technology piece and they don't have to know anything else.
Well,
Those
or the product people don't need to know enough about technology. I mean, it really works both ways.
It works both ways.
Everybody's got to come together and understand stuff. One of our first episodes on AI ready culture was about this really highly collaborative culture, because you're going to have cross-functional teams of people working on AI together, just like you work on Google Docs. It's happening already. You
Right.
people can work as a team on developing a solution in the tool. And so this is going to be more important than ever. And
Yeah.
that gets down to this, the lack of belonging, where you have these walls or people not accepting somebody on the team. It can happen at the team level, can happen at the department level, cross-functionally, can happen at the company. I don't feel I belong here. People like that they're not real comfortable questioning anything, quite honestly. And so sense of belonging and friendship leads to um, a lot more comfort in asking questions would be the way I would describe it. And so how many organizations have a great sense of belonging? We did a whole series on belonging. What
Mhm.
is belonging? How do you create a sense of belonging? I think it was 10 episodes.
Yeah.
And, belonging, as it turns out, it's not even an emotion, it's a feeling. And so you've got to create an environment where people feel they belong. And this is pieces of it, but there's a lot more to it. You must have a great sense of belonging cross-functionally. You got to tear those walls and silos down. They got to feel they're part of the company. And belonging is an emotional state. And you've got to work on that. And then people will be very comfortable starting to adapt and change and questioning things and seeking help when they need it. They're going to need a lot of help to get up this learning curve. So, yeah, this is big.
Yeah, belonging is subjective too. So what makes Frank feel like he belongs is going to be different than what makes me feel like I belong. And as a leader, you have to be able to decipher that. You can't just say, well, I gave them a bonus. Everybody should feel like they
Oh,
belong.
yeah, that was great.
I
How you,
applaud this across the board.
how
Everybody,
you unhappy? You got paid well. What are you worried about?
right?
Do your job.
Yeah, I've actually had that in a performance review once, where somebody said,
Early in
basically
my career,
said,
somebody said that to me.
you should be glad that you have a job, that this is a lot of money for you to make. You should be glad. And I was just like, wow, really? That's the kind of leadership we're giving, advice we're giving to people.
Motivational, that's the motivational aptitude of those people.
Yeah, it was just
Crazy.
unreal. It stunned me. I was
Yeah.
just absolutely speechless to hear that somebody would be so brazen to say it.
Yeah. And Tara, I think we should plug that other 10 episode series we did on how to motivate people without money.
Yes,
It's another
absolutely.
great series because that plays into this. All of those factors that are emotional, that motivate people and make them want to work hard. That ambition and drive and that acknowledgement, the meaning, all this stuff. This is
Yeah.
huge. And so
All of
we'll put
these
it here.
traits build the character traits of the organization build upon each other. So you can't just take one thing and that's it. You have to really look at the big picture
You
and
do.
take the time, go back and look at the other episodes. We're really giving you a great roadmap on how you can change culture of your organization.
Enormous. And then, of course, you get to this. No recognition and reward. It's not important. We reward other things. We don't reward people who question stuff. So the people who are skeptical and are really good at questioning things and bring up very valuable thoughts and ideas, they should be rewarded for that. You could call it the skeptic award, whatever you want, but you're going to have to encourage this. And when you publicly recognize it and reward it, more of it happens. What gets rewarded gets done. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
It's an old cliche, but it is true. Really matters.
It really does matter. And there's a way to ask questions without being challenging. So you can challenge without being challenging, or have such a negative way that you talk to people with a negative tone and just, trying to tear people down and explain to them why they're wrong. That's not what this is about. Having a questioning culture is just about, let's take this through the paces and validate, is this really the road that we want to go down? Have we explored all of our options?
Yeah.
Ask questions as a leader, prompt people to think about it. Don't just take what I'm saying at face value. Think about what I'm saying and process it through your lens of whichever team you're on, whether you're in sales, marketing, IT, whichever team you're on. Take this idea and run it through the paces of what you would have to do to implement it. Are
Yeah.
there gaps? Are we missing something? Are we looking at this from the wrong perspective? Do you see a different perspective? These are all ways that you can question without being such a challenge and get to the point where, oh, here she goes again with more questions, more questions. When people start feeling like that, it's
Yeah.
it's sometimes the way that you're asking the question. So just keep that in the back of your mind, that there's a way to question without making people feel like you're challenging everything that they say.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of research on questions. There's books written about asking questions. I would recommend people get them. There is a book, Great Leaders Ask Great Questions. I read that book.
Yeah.
It's available free online. It's a great book. But great coworkers ask great questions. It goes beyond that because in this era, it is going to be the questioning culture that is much more adaptable, that's going to embrace AI and implement it in a way that makes sense and works. They're going to get much more out of it. And then we get down to this final one, these clock watchers, who it's like, I don't want to put any extra effort in at all. I'm not going to ask a question. That requires work. I don't want to think about this. Just tell me what to go do. Thank you.
Yeah. So they're just sitting there collecting the paycheck. They don't want to engage. They don't want to give too much of their time or energy, their resources, nothing. They just want to do the bare minimums to get by.
We did a show on quiet quitting, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
3 years ago, Microsoft did a study and came away saying 50% of all workers are quiet quitting at the office. They're not inspired. They're not motivated. They're doing the bare minimum. They're disengaged clock watchers.
Yeah, they're just showing up every day.
Yeah.
They're not really adding value to the team.
Not at all. And so they're never going to ask a lot of questions because they don't care enough. And so these are some techniques that you can think about. These are all negative indicators. If this is happening in your culture, you do not have an AI-ready culture. No doubt about it. Now, next week, we've got a really good show. We have a special guest on, George Pace. He runs Keep Pace, and he's been doing blogging and talks on AI for, 5, 8 years. I don't know. It's been a long time. Great guy. He's joining Terry and I, and we're going to be talking about those essential human qualities that have become much more important as AI gets rid of all the mundane work and all the generative work that goes on in companies. So, please tune in. We're here every Wednesday at 3:00. And I don't know, did we introduce ourselves? I'm Frank Wander. Yeah, I did at the beginning.
You did. Yeah.
All right. I'm repeating it. What an idiot. Anyway, we'll be here next Wednesday at 3:00. I hope you could join us for the next part of this series on AI and human machine teaming.